I'm Steve Luke of Cloudburst Brewing, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest today is Dan Suarez of the Suarez Family Brewery, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Falling temps and festive seasons are fast approaching, which means now is a good time to develop holiday stouts and brown ales using hibiscus and cinnamon from First Tea. Looking for other new ideas? You can find out more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttea.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog. Beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, Malteurop Malting Company's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malteurop Malting Company can support your malting needs. Contact Malteurop Malting Company at customersuccess@malteurop.com or dial 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Dan Suarez operates Suarez Family Brewery in the Hudson Valley region of New York with his partner Taylor Kokolis. Did I say that right, Dan?
Yeah, that's good. That's great.
Suarez Family Brewery is a small operation of 6 people, focusing mostly on brewing simple and delicate beers geared towards ease of drinkability. So thanks for coming on my single podcast show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, like 14 years, 13 years, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that
is crazy long,
isn't it? But
yeah.
It kind of flies, you know. It's like your head down and like opened a brewery, and which is now how old?
7.5 years old.
Sweet. It's kind of like our age.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of breweries opened in 2016, right in that pocket. There was a very large explosion.
Well, kind of like the ground was laid for us to it was prime. There weren't too many breweries, or at least people weren't talking, about like how many breweries there are.
Yeah, not as much as they are now. Nowadays everybody's just like, oh, there's too many breweries. They don't say, is there too many? They don't ask, is there too many breweries? People say there are too many breweries. But yeah, I mean, very few closures as of now. It's crazy.
Yeah, we in the city in Seattle, we've seen a few, more and more. I feel like there's more closing than opening, but there's still plenty closing. And it is kind of slowing down these days, where it's like there was kind of a slurry of a few breweries every year, and now it's like maybe one brewery every year. And it takes so long.
It's tough out there, I think. I mean, at least from my standpoint. It's yeah, I mean, the pandemic was obviously a challenge, and there was like a crazy roller coaster, but I feel like 2022 and 2023 have been this like weird kind of crazy limbo where like the market is obviously changed from what it was pre-2020. It's so different, Yeah, I just feel like people are drinking less beer, and I don't know, people are doing some other things. So I don't know.
Did you have to change your model dramatically when the pandemic hit?
We were New York State allowed us to ship beer kind of overnight, and I had always, even before we opened the brewery, I had always thought shipping beer was cool. I was like, man, the wineries are doing it. Especially for our bottled stuff, which it turns out like the market for our canned beer is stronger than for our bottled beer, but like I've always thought the potential for ship beer was so great, and the pandemic hit and we were kind of instantly allowed to do it. And we opened up DC and Pennsylvania too, and yeah, it's been cool. Yeah, it's been great. It's like added revenue stream, and we did in 2020 and even 2021 we did a lot of shipping. It was, we made so much more beer than we do currently.
Wow.
Yeah, it was overwhelming and crazy, but and then since then, like 2022 and 2023, I don't know. They're hard to figure out for me, at least.
Constant like figuring out and like the evolution of like the craft beer scene, but then also just like your little business, where
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah. I feel like everyone,
flexibility. Like
yeah.
you guys seem fairly flexible, right? Like how many barrels, how big are you? Like
Oh, man, maybe just under 2,000 barrels.
nice.
Yeah, we've been adding since we've started, we've been adding tanks every year, but we haven't made any, except with the exception of 2020, we haven't made significantly more beer. We just use those tanks to like add more time to the lager beers, which
Cool.
is really cool. Yeah. In the wintertime, we can give some of the lagers like up to there was one batch of Palatine last winter that was like 5 months. It was so
Oh
good.
my God.
And every week you taste it, at least I can, and I think most people you can taste the difference. Like week to week, I'm like better, 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 just smoother and cleaner and all that.
So even so there was no like you have no time limit, like just the more time the better. There's no like peak in your
No,
mind.
I think 5 months probably is the max. I think actually 4 months is probably the max. Yeah, I don't think it gets better after that, but yeah, like in the summertime we can't give that long. We give like probably 2.5 months to the loggers, which is still good enough for me. Considering when we opened they were like 5 week beers. Now I can't even believe that we only gave 5 weeks to these beers, but it's just what we had to do when we opened.
And so are these like 15 barrel batch size? What's your kit?
20 hectoliter, yeah, so like
20 heck.
17 and a half barrel.
Nice. And are you
Yeah.
lagering in horizontals or are these just
No.
like unitang all the way?
We transfer to we do the standard American microbrewery process and format, which is ferment and conical rack to upright bright tank. Our brew house, there's no heating elements, there's no steam jackets, so it's single infusion. It's really like kind of your 90s brew pub American, yeah, English style. It's really simple, and that's kind of my philosophy, at least about brewing, but even other things. I love simplicity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I also like to do what I know. I've been I've worked in a couple other breweries, and like this knowledge has been passed down to me, and this is just kind of what I'm used to, and like working within that comfort zone and yeah, just working within that.
yes, like I'm like on the same wavelength. Like constantly we're looking at our processes, and it's just like keep it simple, stupid. Like why
Yeah,
do more with diminishing returns, kind of a thing.
for
So
sure.
uh,
I think for beer and for other elements in the brewery, it's like I'm always looking to take away I'm never looking to add. I'm always looking to like strip it back. So like recipe wise, I'm like, why add 3 hops in the kettle when I could try 2, see how that is. Is it better? Is it as good? So yeah, simplicity, but then even that applies to many different aspects of the brewery too. It's like simplify, simplify, simplify.
Especially with like a small team too, where I don't know how many people are in the brewery with you.
It's me and one other person, Matt Moon, and he's been here since the very beginning, like
Wow.
right before we opened. Yeah, so he knows the brewery inside and out, and so it's just, and then we have obviously like some of the other employees, for bottling and canning, they're part of that. But for like brewing and cellaring tasks, it's me and or Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of nice like having someone on the same page for like that long uh
Yeah, for sure.
in your shop.
Yes.
So I guess like getting kind of backtracking a little bit, where is your kit used or did you
No, we bought it new from Newlands, which
nice.
yeah, I like it. It was a little bit of a nightmare at the time to get it delivered. It was really delayed, and when it was delivered, it was delivered like broken. They like didn't latch down the equipment, so like I opened the container, like I clipped the, it's like, all right, you're clipping it and you're saying you're signing Dan Suarez and you're clipping it, and like whatever happens after this is your responsibility. And I was like, okay. So I clipped the thing, I opened it, and like all the equipment was rolling around. It had been from British Columbia to New York. It had been rolling around and all banged up and fucked up. Oh, sorry.
Oh
um
my God.
yeah, so that was a nightmare. So then it was already delayed, but I don't want to go too much into that. I like the brew house. Um, yeah, new brew house. It does the job.
So back when like our last communication, like you were looking to buy a used brew house that I had just, left.
Oh, I forgot. I totally forgot that. Wow,
Yes,
Steve.
like a
Yes.
7 barrel pub,
Yes,
stacked pub.
with 14 barrel fermenters and yeah, a pub system in Cambridge House in Connecticut. Yes, I looked at that, and in hindsight, like I probably should have bought it. It was so cheap, but
Yeah.
I'm glad. I mean, I like our brew house, and just starting with 20 hectoliter new system, it's a load off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that was, I mean, the pub systems, they're kind of a known entity. It's like you can make some nice word on them, but they're not
Yeah.
designed like kind of for modern interpretations of beers at this point,
Yeah.
that mash tun above the hot liquor tank.
Yeah.
It's like it's fine. But that was like 2009 or
Yeah,
like
that
2010.
was, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I basically, yeah, I was just like poking around, I was still pretty, yeah, like green in the brewing world, professional brewing world, but yeah, like poking around and knowing that I wanted to own a brewery, not knowing what I know now about owning a brewery. uh but yeah, always, just like any other, I feel like it's such a, just like any brewer, it's like the typical thing is like start home brewing, and like after your first batch you're like, I'm gonna open a brewery. So I was always poking around.
And then what, Six Point was your first spot?
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I met you. Yeah, I worked at Six Point. A friend of mine who I'd gone to college with, Craig Frymark, which
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, for
and
Barrier.
yeah, and so he got the job right out of college, and I was like, how'd you get that job? Like, let me come wash kegs. And at the time, I was working retail. I was working at Murray's Cheese, and so I would have like, Monday, Wednesday off, or Monday, Tuesday off. So always during the week. So on my day off, I would want to homebrew, and then I was like, Craig, I was like, get me in there. And he was like, I just got the job. I'm brand new. Like I can't like, I have no weight there. And then I think like a year later, he was like, all right, remember when you mentioned you want to get in here? I was like, yeah, I'm down. so he kind of opened the door for me, and yeah, and worked there for 3 years. Met Steve here at the Beer Advocate festivals.
Yeah,
I think working at Cambridge House or Allagash, or both.
probably both.
Yeah, um, and worked there for maybe close to 3 years, and then kind of through like a friend of a friend, met Sean Hill, and this is before he started the brewery in Vermont, and went up there right when before the brewery was open, and spent some time up there, and like, I don't know, a few months later, he sent me a job offer being like, come move up to Vermont and work here. And I didn't want to. I said, oh, I like living in New York City. I feel like I just like got my footing, and I like the job at Six Point and whatnot. But my wife was like, this is like, I think she wanted to move to Vermont, which like I wasn't sure about. But after moving there, like one day later, I was like, oh yeah, it's great here. And then she was like, you're gonna get to learn all the stuff you want to learn: barrel aging, Brettanomyces, wild ales, and just like really getting deep on it. And yeah, kind of learning from somebody who's pretty focused.
And then from there, you and your partners were always kind of like working on like your end game, which was going to be opening like your own space at some point. Kind of like, was that out in the open with Sean at a certain point?
Yeah, actually, when I took the job, I was like, I'm gonna work here for a year, and then I'm gonna start a brewery afterwards. And then it just, you can't. I think 1 year is a little. I feel like I was there for about 3 years. I feel like that was a good amount of time. 1 year, we were barely scratching the surface. Um, yeah, yeah, but it also just like the time there, in the industry, learning, but then also just like thinking, like letting the wheels turn, and just thinking about what I would want to do in our own place. Originally, I had this idea to like, I wanted to make one wort and then just divert the worts to on different yeast, and I wanted to do like a saison and a kolsch. I remember people laughing at, like, other brewers laughing at me, being like, "You're gonna open a kolsch brewery?" Or yeah, and even some people like laughed when I said I want to make pilsner primarily. They were like, "It's there," like, yeah. So anyway,
So have this time. Now finally pills. Like people are like stoked on pills. Kolsch is
yeah,
still like this up and coming thing to me, I think, for the
kolsch
greater like
is it's happening, man. I feel like in the past year, I feel like we've had so many more people ask about kolsch. And we make a couple different kinds of kolsch. One that's like a little hoppier, and one that's like pretty true to style. But I even in right before the pandemic, in February of 2020, I went to Düsseldorf and Cologne, and I came back and I was like, man, if I was opening a brewery tomorrow, I would do like a Rhineland style brewery that would just do like, we would hammer Kolsch and Alt, and we could spin off some stuff from there. Kolsch is really cool. Alt is really cool too. Um, but yeah, Pills is happening. Kolsch is happening. I like that it's a slow burn with Pills though. It's an I that's my speed.
it's true. I mean, it's always been there. It's always like, you ask the brewer what they're drinking as they're shifty when they're done. It's like they're always gravitating towards those types of beers. I feel like it's just taken a decade for someone to say, like, oh, every time there's an interview and you ask the brewer like what they're drinking, they're always like, this pill's over here, and maybe I should start paying attention to that. What the makers are gravitating towards. I feel like.
Yeah. Um yeah, it's I mean, it's heartening that it has been this, yeah, A, brewer driven, but B, it's heartening that like it's this slow burn, because I feel like especially the American brewing scene is so turn and burn, trend heavy, like flavor of the week kind of thing, that um I like that Pills it's not the flavor of the week. It's like it's gonna be here for us, you know? And it's just like something that's, yeah, it's like comfort food for me. And I'm like, there's what's there to, I mean, I guess I don't know. It's hard to make, I guess, like, and some people might mess it up, but like, yeah, I like that it's not like a flash in the pan. It's evident that it's not.
Well, it's like so with it finally kind of like having, it's day in the light a little bit now. Are you finding more variable, like questionable, like quality from breweries in your area? Like if everyone's starting to be like, oh, Pills is becoming popular, I should make one too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. There's a lot of pills out there now, which I like because I think people should be drinking more pills, and I think it should be like a normal one of the, I think there should be a great, people should make all kinds of different things. And but yeah, I guess especially in New York, everybody seems to make a pills. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country. Does everybody make a pills in Washington?
I think yeah. I mean, we've had, Chuckanut has been kind of paving the way out here for us. And then,
Classic.
and then like so many brewers have kind of come through Chuckanut to then do
It's
their own
cool.
versions, right? You've got
Yeah.
Freem, you have Wayfinder, and now
Yeah.
which is Kevin's at Gold Dot now with his partner
Yeah.
Lisa at Heater Allen. So I mean, like the Northwest has a pretty
Yeah.
solid lager game. They're
Yeah.
not like from flashy breweries per se, which
I
is
don't,
almost better. It's like these like homey,
yeah. Yeah.
breweries that are like, well, they've
Yeah.
been making pills the longest and like they don't need to be flashy. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. But yeah, to your question, are there some questionable pills? Uh, I think there's a lot of pills, and I think it's hard to make. So like there's a lot of average pills, but I'm glad people are making it, or I'm glad people are trying their hand at it, because I think yeah, you got to make some drinkable beers. I mean, that's really like all I yeah, I especially because on the other end, it's like somebody could be making like a marshmallow stout with whatever graham crackers and whatnot, and that's totally valid. But like, you got to give somebody something to like sip on. And also, man, I love when like people who are like whatever Heineken drinkers or Coors Light drinkers come into our brewery, they're kind of sheepish. Uh, I usually drink Michelob Ultra. I'm like, you got to try Palatine pills. And sometimes they're like blown away. Sometimes they're absolutely like astonished, and that's so cool to me. That like, it's just kind of this yellow beer that's kind of crisp and refreshing, but like it can be a beer that just like glides down your throat at the end of like a long day, or it can be this beer that you can like geek out and like really geek out about, yeah, and like pick apart. It can be either.
yeah, it's
Which
like,
some, yeah,
well, I don't know. It's like part of that is just like some of the best, the most well executed, versions of pills become thought. You can turn it off. It's,
yeah, yeah,
the Master Cicerone and the Michelob Ultra Drinker can both just not have to think about
yeah,
this like enjoyable experience.
totally. I usually think about it, but like I can't turn it off. But I like that I can think about it like crazy so that other people can't think about it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that. I like that.
And I mean, like that, like with that style, there's always going to be a learning curve. And I think kind of like coming from your philosophy of like keeping it simple, we've had a few conversations with right now. There's some sometimes we get asked questions, especially people in our front of house are like people are like, hey, I heard about this decoction thing. Like, are your
Yeah,
lagers decocted? And no,
yeah,
we have a pretty similar setup to you. We've
yeah.
got a single infusion mash tun, a direct fire kettle, and a
Hmm.
whirlpool. And so kind of like there's a lot of information out there, and not everyone is the best editor at first, so you kind of are like, oh, if I'm going to make this bow pills, I'm going to have to use
Yeah.
this type of malt. We're going to have to decoct. I should really be sourcing these hops, and kind of not focusing on just like starting from scratch, like from the simple side of things, and then getting a little bit more intricate once you've mastered like something
Yeah.
from its baseline.
Or not getting more intricate. Honestly, like the recipe for Palatine, it's like you open up like How to Brew, the book, and like look up the recipe for like pale ale or pills, and like that's you look up the pills. It's like an addition at 60, an addition at 30, and an addition at the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like you don't have to overthink it. Yeah, I always especially with these simple beers, it's better, I think, if they're not overthought.
But like you're
Yeah,
kind of in the land of like juicy, hazy IPA worlds where those beers are still quite sweet to my palate. Like every time I go back east, it's just like, wow, these beers are still finishing really sweet. There's
yeah,
no kettle edition hops, and
yep.
I wonder if like that translation of like brewing that type of beer for so long, do people kind of come into like the Pilsner and say, are you getting too cute with your kettle editions for like a
Yeah,
Pilsner?
or way too many Whirlpool editions. I feel like that's one I can like taste when I taste somebody else's pills. I'm like, the Whirlpool edition is way too big. Yeah, that's a typical one. Because I feel like sometimes it has like a hollow center to the palate. Like
Yeah.
there's not enough early hops, and there's like too many late hops, so like it kind of seems hoppy, but it has this like empty or like hollow palate. So yeah, just take some of those hops and shift them to the beginning. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Read How to Brew. I don't know if there's a pills recipe in there actually, but there probably is.
I mean, there's a
Yeah.
Greg Noonan's got a whole book of
Yeah,
lagers.
there you go. Classic.
Classic.
Great book.
Um,
Um,
all right. Well, hey, this is I'm gonna go into that little break.
you're listening to the All About Beer podcast with Steve Luke and Dan Suarez. You're rocking with the best here. Um, we're gonna take a quick break. As John Hall says, we gotta pay some bills here.
We gotta pay some bills. Where
Boop,
is John's
boop-a-doo-doo.
script? I was actually like searching my email to see what Kolsch I had ordered from you guys this past summer.
Yes.
Because it was like, oh, you do multiple pills, and
Yeah.
it was like May or June.
Yeah. It's a fine line. Was that it?
Yeah, that's what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Um, oh man, John, you already kind of did that work for like, yeah, we're gonna take a short break for this message and then come right back for more of this conversation with Dan Suarez of the Suarez Family Brewery.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, Malteurop Malting Company's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe Malting Company can support your malting needs. Contact Malt Europe Malting Company at customersuccess@malteurope.com or dial 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. First Tea has ginger for the gingerbread stout, or try a porter or brown ale with ginger, vanilla, and cinnamon. Looking for other seasonal ideas? You can find out more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttea.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
All right, welcome back, listeners,
To the podcast.
to the podcast. I don't know how you got that sultry, smooth. You
Yeah.
must do podcasts all the time, huh?
No, I was a radio person in college.
Were you?
Yeah.
Is that what your degree is in?
Not
Like,
really. Not really. Well, I guess kind of maybe media, communication. I don't
nice.
know. It's all none of it matters.
I did one radio show in college and we got kicked out like after 3 episodes because
Oh, come on, Steve.
it wasn't me, but my roommate who said he'd close up the shop definitely like got pretty drunk and played the same song like 3 times in a row. And it was like I had
No,
to go study for
nay.
an exam. It was like, oh man, dude, you left beers all over the studio, and it was not a.
Yeah. And what about the listener?
What about the listener? They probably like, why is he playing? Like, why is he playing Black Betty again by Ramjit? Like,
Okay, nice. We're back with the
now we're back.
podcast. Yeah, what do you want to get into, Steve?
I mean, like, I kind of wanted to segue into this like small business work life
Mm,
balance thing that I think all of us are so, especially more so post pandemic, like cognizant of.
yeah.
And I mean, so you operate your business with your wife. So like, this is kind of
Yeah.
what both of you do full time.
Yeah, my wife has another gig, but yes. Yeah, more or less. Yeah, we're in it.
And then, yeah, and then a few other employees. So, pandemic hits. I know it was stressful for everyone, but when you have such a small team,
Yeah.
what were some of like the biggest challenges to kind of like keep the ship afloat? Like, uh, you know, at least in regards to like you and your personal health, and also you and your team's health. We felt it kind of from
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, man, I don't know if I can speak to my team's health. I think our brewery is more chill than your average brewery, and that's on purpose. Yeah. Yeah, like all the employees get work a 4-day work week. Um so like 36 hours a week basically, plus or minus. And Tay and I, we like sometimes sometimes get the 4-day week, but yeah, I mean, just going back to even before the pandemic, I mean, the pandemic was just like something completely and utterly bizarre and crazy. But I think just like even just the beginning of the brewery, like I have like a history of anxiety and depression, I guess. And then like before we started the brewery, I was just extremely anxious that that the beer was going to be no good and that people weren't going to like it. And that may or may not be rational, but like even like opening, even now that we've opened the brewery and I'm like, all right, yeah, I like the beers, and other people seem to like them too. So I guess we're over that hump. There's like constant struggles with, I don't know, any number of things like work life balance. It's easy to like grind yourself to the bone especially when it's your brewery, but even like people working at other breweries as employees, I just feel like at some breweries they're like expected to work like unlimited amount of hours, like you're gonna work 90 hours, and that's just, yeah, I just feel like I'd like to like get to a better place. And I don't know, I'm not a very like philosophical person, I'm a very simple person, but I feel like my wife and I, Tay, have been talking lately about like what is the purpose of the brewery? It's like, I mean, I guess some brewery, it's not a lot of businesses. What do they call that? Sometimes they put it in their business plan. It's
Mission statement.
the mission statement. This is like a little different, but kind of the same. But it's like it's more of like a philosophy to the brewery. It's like, what is the purpose? And so any proposition or any idea or anything that we may or may not do get filtered through this purpose statement, or through like, what is our purpose? We still haven't come up with the purpose. I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but I don't know. It's I feel like we touched on it a little bit. It's like simplicity. It's definitely work-life balance. Like we have 2 kids. And I'd like to spend more time with my kids. I feel like when we were opening the brewery, there was like a plumber who was doing some work, and this is when it was right before we opened, and Tay was pregnant with our first kid, and the plumber was like, always make the time. Oh, he like grabbed me by the shoulder. He was like, don't miss any soccer games. Don't miss any, like he was like, you're never going to get it back. And I feel like I still think back on that. And I mean, like I said, like our brewery is more chill than a lot of other breweries in terms of like work-life balance. But I still, at least for me, I'm like, I want to spend more time with my kids and have more family time, because you never get it back. So how do you reconcile the fact that like there's certain things that we maybe have to do to pay the bills and to make it all work, and then also like get what we want for like the work life balance, and not just for me, for everyone really here.
Yeah, and I mean, we're of similar like nature, where most of our team also has 4 days a week. The 2 other people in the brewery do. Most front of house people, we try to keep them working 3 to 4 days a week as this like self-preservation. I feel like I can never turn off, and I feel like I work every day, even if I'm on vacation. It's just so hard to just not do something or think about. I mean, even if you're not physically doing something, you're thinking about something. It's this all consuming, venture that you have other people that, rely on you. And so I think one of the interesting aspects of like your business, and it's similar to ours, where it's like quote unquote, like no growth. Like we've made around 2,000 barrels a year, give or take, for the last 5 of our 7 years in existence. And we're not driven by growth, obviously. But costs keep going up, and so you kind of have to get constantly creative with like, how do you still maintain a healthy business by being so stubbornly like stuck to your vision of the brewery.
And speaking on costs, like the past 3 years, it's not like they just like inch up. It's like, oh, every year a few percent. It's like some things have just jumped. A lot of things have actually jumped exorbitantly. It's like the soap for the dishwasher, and electricity, and the bottles, and the malt, and it's like everything all at once. And now it's like, oh my God, like
have you been able to rate do you pass that on to consumers? Like, have you been able to make some of those margins back?
We like, I don't know if this is answering your question, but we increased prices for the first time ever this past spring. Just at the brewery. Actually, our wholesale prices have stayed the same, but I don't know. I got to look at that. I don't know. I like the past, like as I mentioned before, like the past 2 years have been like this kind of after like the first 2 years of the pandemic, and like I said, in 2020 we were like shipping like hundreds of pallets or hundreds of boxes of beer every week is crazy. And then the past couple of years, it's like not stagnated, but like it's hard to figure out where which direction to go and how to proceed. I'm not sure.
Because like, how much is going to New York City? Like,
Hardly, not as much as we used to. We have a van still, and we used to deliver every other week to New York City. And we had I don't know, 20 accounts, maybe more, a little bit more, but since the pandemic, all the accounts pick up. So like anytime you see our beer in New York City, it's been picked up
that's awesome.
by somebody. Yeah, it's great. Whenever brewers hear that, they're like, wait, they're picking up, and I'm like, yes, only pickups. It is great. And you know, like a place like Tourists, they come every 2 weeks and they fill a minivan with beer, and it's incredible. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would do it if I owned a bar in New York City, but like maybe I would. I don't know. Yeah, so not a lot less nowadays. The past 3 years in New York City, we used to fill a lot of draft. Also, yeah, we draft used to be a very normal part of what we did, and now way less so. It's mostly cans with only a drop of draft, really. I feel what we kind of need for here at the brewery, and then like a tiny amount extra. Which is a bummer because I love draft beer. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but it went away in one day, right? And you're
yeah,
like,
it went away at one point in 2020, but yeah, cans are I don't want to say like idiot proof, but they're like they're just more consistent service wise. And even though like I think draft beer trumps it in terms of flavor, it's just like you don't have to deal with dirty lines, you don't have to deal with any number of things. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, or even just like the filling of like your beer into a growler or a crowler, where it's just
Yeah,
like, to me, I'd rather see it all the way through in the package. We kind of learned that early pandemic too, because we were draft only up until 2020, and then
yeah. Ooh,
you know
that must have been real tough.
had a mobile canner in like twice, and I was like, I can't work with these people. I don't know this machine, and I didn't hire
Yeah,
these people to work on this line. And now
yeah.
we're like 60% can, 40% draft. It kind of ebbs and flows, but
Wow.
um,
Oh, and did you buy your own line?
yeah, we
Oh,
got in pretty early. We drained the bank, and we got a 6 head counter pressure Cody.
oh,
Uh,
cool.
and yeah, it's solid. I mean, with like loggers, you can carve that to like 2.9, 3.1, and like
Yeah,
there's
wow.
very little loss. What are you
Wow, that's
using?
we do mobile canning with
Okay,
Ironheart.
nice.
Honestly, it works. I think somebody, like I'm there, Matt's there. We're we're in it.
Yeah.
We're making sure everything is copacetic, and the beer is gonna be good on the other end. As much as we can, I guess. Um,
What do you
yeah.
do for quality? Like, do you have like a C box or Orbisphere or?
Oh, we have a Hoffman's Pentair digital Gehaltometer, which actually,
Oh, fancy, fancy.
yeah, yes. And you want to know how I got it? Um, when we took delivery of the Newlands equipment and it was all messed up, I was like, guys, this is so like, what the heck? Like, what are you gonna do for me to make this up? And then I was just like, I see you're a distributor for Hoffman Pentair. If you give me a digital Gehaltometer, like I can maybe let it be. And they gave me one.
Wow, it's
I
nice
mean,
play.
at the time I was like, it's hardly worth it, but now I'm like, man, we couldn't. We've had that since day one, and it's done such incredible things for the quality of our beer. Like to be able to hook up to a bright tank and read the percentage of oxygen in the blow off gas it's insane. And then so like sometimes if that number is too high, we can go, oh, is there a leak? Like we can like catch leaks or whatever. And so yeah, it's so fun to like, oh well, and also sometimes aggravating, but like we had somewhat recently a little bit of a mystery dissolved oxygen spike, but I feel like we got to the bottom of it finally. But we never, yeah, the Gehaltometer is like, it helps us get there. And especially making the kind of beers that we make that are more delicate, like you can't hide behind the flavor, like bold flavors. We need that thing. So it's amazing that we were able, from day one, we've been able to. I remember I even bought a Zamennagel, what do you call the one that you shake up?
Yeah.
And I had already bought it, and then they sent me the Gehaltometer, and I was like, oh, even just using that Zamennagel for like a month, for like the first like 2 weeks, I was like, I'm gonna be so happy to sell this to somebody else and just use this. Anyway, I feel like we're getting a little too geeky brewery.
I don't know.
Steve.
No, that's a good. I mean, that's nice. It's like, yeah, I couldn't sell my Zamanegel just because in the rare times that like our C box like filter gets clogged or something, it's like you're like, man, I have to use this piece of
Yeah.
junk that's hanging on my sink for like 6 months without
Yeah.
being used.
Yeah.
It's not a knock. It's a great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy to compare the two because we'll be like, wow, this is like so far off on like what our actual carb is.
The Zamennagel, and for listeners out there who don't know, it's this little stainless steel canister that you hook up to your tank, you run the beer through, and then you like close it off and shake it. And then it gives you a pressure reading, and you take the temperature, and then you're able to like decipher the carbonation from those numbers. But it's so dependent on how hard you shake it. So like I feel like you can, like you can make it give it the numbers you want sometimes. That's how I've always felt about it.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't matter what the actual number is. You can shake it or not shake it to get you there. Um anyway, that's some real that's some obscure knowledge
Where it's gonna go. People are
for the casual listener. Yeah.
Googling Zamanegel right now. Like, how do you spell that?
Oh, they're New York based. They're like based in somewhere out in Western, like Buffalo or Rochester or something like that, which I think is kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I get like an email from them once a year. Kind of, here's what's for sale. So what's like, how do you going forward? Like, how are you staying motivated? Like, we kind of talked a little bit about like this, what is enough, quote unquote, enough a little bit.
Yes.
And like,
Yeah.
where is Suarez Family Brewing like going?
Oh man, really tough. I mean, I'll tell you from a professional standpoint, I love, I don't get to do it too often, but like I love traveling to the old world to see like the beer culture there, which is incredible and so different from us. Like that's how I get inspiration for beer, which like I've devoted my life to beer. It seems somewhat trivial to. It's like I've devoted my life to something that like people just put down their throat. Like they let it sit on their tongue for a second and then it goes down their throat. But it's a little bit more than that. And I feel like whenever I go to Europe to like travel to some cool, well entrenched beer culture, I'm like blown away. And I love like the whole vibe of drinking there and how casual it is and how little choice there is. That's something like I've been grappling with. Like I think originally pre-pandemic in our tasting room we had, I don't know, 7 or 8 drafts to choose from. And then kind of post-pandemic when we opened outdoors, it was one beer. But I've realized since then, and I've also read Paradox of Choice, which I would recommend a lot of people, especially brewers or business owners, read. That like now we have two draft beers, and I feel like that's a really great, because people, when they come and there's one beer, they're like, oh, I'm disappointed. There's only one beer. When there's two beers, they're like, oh, I can have this or I can have that. A choice is being made, and there's like some excitement and or there's a scintillation there. Um, and then I think we're doing an expansion out back where we're gonna have like the future shop and tasting tap. And I think we've landed on 4, but I like 3 too. And actually
Yeah.
in the book, he's like 3 is the perfect amount because people anything after that, people get overwhelmed. And then you make a choice. You're like, oh, I'll take a Palatine Pills, but then you're like, man, but I really wanted to taste that. What am I missing out? Anyway, I digress.
And well,
Um,
and with your beers and their design, like 3 is like a nice amount for this for low ABV,
yeah.
like
And I
pretty
want to
little beer.
get it to that like more European thing where you don't have to really think about it. Like that, like I was before I went on a huge tangent, I was saying like I love going and some of these places there's only one beer. Sometimes there's 2 or 3. And I just love like the like you don't everybody's drinking the same thing. I think that does a big part of like the you walk into a place and it's filled with people and literally everybody is drinking the same thing. I think that does something to the whole vibe of a room. Um, and then to like expound on the where to get inspiration and the travels to Europe, it's like not only is the vibe and the beer culture kind of more my speed, and I really like taking inspiration from that. Um, it's like the beers, they also taste different. Sometimes you'll taste beers and I'm like, you can't brew this beer in the United States. This beer tastes like it's brewed in a quote unquote far off land. And so sometimes when I brew a beer and I'll taste a beer of mine that I brewed, and if it tastes like it was brewed somewhere else far away, I'm like, whoa, I love that. I really get off on that. I like it. So yeah. So man, we do have to your original question, we do have this what's next, where what's the next steps?
But like
We
back before you get into next
Yeah,
steps, like all right, so
yeah,
this old ale you just put out, like a
yes,
like a modern old ale because what it's
yeah.
low in ABV.
Yeah, of which there are many brewed all over the UK currently.
Yeah,
Like some of them are 4% ABV, some of them are 5, some of them are 6, some of them are 7 or 8, which is getting up there, but still like one of the ones that I had on a trip back in January, it was 8, but I like still drinking it, still served out of a sparkler on hand pump in a pint. And drinking it, I'm like, man, there's a smoothness and a delicacy to the flavor of it's still like at 8 point something percent ABV. It's still like it took me a long time to drink it. I was like sipping on it. It was commanding of the time I put into it. But like I was like, man, there's something about the smoothness and that you don't. Yeah, and I think before we started the podcast, we were talking about it a little bit. We brewed an old ale that's modern, and yeah, I think the connotation like pre-World War One, there's like old ale was like this like stock ale. It's like, yeah, that's how like certain strain of Brettanomyces, there was probably Brettanomyces in there. It was really strong. It was like this stock ale, this barley wine-esque thing. And in this country, especially even me prior to this trip last January, going to the UK and being like, oh, old ale is kind of barley wine-ish, maybe a little darker, maybe sometimes barrel aged or not, sometimes Brett, sometimes not, but still like has that power to it. And then we had a couple that I was like, I drank Old Peculiar. There was one night I drank, I don't know, 7 pints of it. And it's kind of Guinnessy and smooth, but so much fruitier, like this tobacco, cocoa, dry, and a lot of dried fruit, like fruit cake, figgy, dried cherry. And it like I'm like, wow, you don't find beers like this ever. And it's also like changing my perception of a certain style. And that was cool. So I had to brew one of those. And you mentioned that there's some people in Pacific Northwest brewing some.
Yeah, our friend Bill Arnott at Machine House, who's he does all English style ales. I forget what town he's from, but he brewed at a
Yeah,
small
he's
pub over
English, right?
there. He's
He's English.
English.
Yes.
Yeah. And his dark mild, it's 3.7, 3.8, but
Nice.
it's so dark that I've brought brewer friends from England to his place, and like this is very dark and roasty and like fruity for
Yeah.
like a traditional dark mild, but to us in the Pacific Northwest, it's just like such this its own thing that you're just like, I crave this beer that
Yeah.
you can just sit down and just like crush
Yeah.
multiples of. And so there is kind of like a little bit of this, like Seattle has a little bit of a scene where it's like, okay, like once a year I can make 15 barrels of like a dark mild, and it still
Yeah.
will take me like 6 months to sell it all. But
Oh,
like,
okay.
but at least like people to like kind of like know what we're going with there.
Yeah.
So like with this old ale, like how do you communicate that to customers that this is a really like how do you communicate that like that passion
Yeah.
uh to say this is why you should kind of care about this like
Yeah.
beer?
Man, this old ale, to be it known, it was one that I thought, and I think everybody on staff thought was going to be like they were like, all right, Dan's going to brew this thing, and it's going to be like obviously an esoteric hard sell, but actually maybe it's because it's the first time we brewed it. Some beers are like that where you brew it once and people are like, yeah, and they do it, and then you brew a second batch, and then they're like, I already had that. And so it's way slower the second time. I'm not sure if this will be like that or not, but it's yeah, I think we packaged it up a single batch 4 weeks ago, exactly 4 weeks ago, and it's almost gone.
Wow.
Yeah. So people are surprisingly very excited about something like this, but I feel like our consumer, the Suarez family brewery, like beer drinker, has been conditioned to like seek out and to be excited by what we make. Like I don't know. I kind of love that culture. It's like I'm taking a personal journey of brewing and getting into beer, and then like I want other people to get on board, and that's cool. So we can brew alt, we can brew smoke beer, we can brew old ale, we can, any number of, I mean, at a time, like even Pills was like when we first started, Pills wasn't even for our brewery, who like I wanted to brew a lot of Pills, but when we brewed pale ale and Pills in the beginning, and everybody wanted the pale ale, and I feel like wholesale, like keg, on premise accounts, like bars and restaurants. And so I was like, oh damn, I don't know if we're going to be able to make the amount of lager and / pills that we want to make. And I was really worried for like 6 to 12 months. And then after 6 to 12 months, it kind of clicked. And then it flip flopped, like like everybody wanted the pills and lager and the pale ale. They were like, oh, we'll take it. But like really just like, and I think that's about getting people to taste the beer, Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I in a little over 10 years ago, um I went to Driefontein and got a tour from Armand, and I went with Sean Hill, so like he was spending time with us, and it was a great tour. But before I left, he shared this Magnum with us. Oh, yes, it's a Magnum, and I only have 20 of these left. My dad helped me blend this, mind blowing. And then as we were leaving, we bought beer, and he was like, do you want me to autograph that for you? And I was like, I'm usually not into autographs, so I was just like, okay. And then on the autograph, he writes, taste my passion, Armand. And I was like, oh, taste my passion, man. And so I often think about that too. I'm like, yeah, taste my passion, because especially as a small brewery, all you have to go on is like what what you're pumped, like what you're able to make and what you're enthusiastic about. And then hopefully everybody gets on the ride, gets on for the
Yeah.
ride.
It's so
It's
funny. So
cool. I love that.
how many bottles do you sign a week at this?
I don't think I would ever. I mean, if somebody, I actually I think a few people have asked, but I would never say, like, we were like leaving, we had just bought bottles and he was like, would you like me to sign those? And I was just like, yes, definitely.
That's cute.
But I always think about that, I when I saw he signed it, it's Taste My Passion, and I was like, wow, okay. It's not just an autograph. It's like a take this with you.
This is a
Yeah.
mantra.
Yeah. And
That's awesome.
I mean, speaking of that, like, yeah, I love the whole, I mean, like the brewers history, like the generations of brewers. I feel like what we do, we're just like doing something that people have been doing for a long time. And I love the fact that like knowledge gets passed down.
Yeah.
You've worked under some people and kind of you're able to take little bits and pieces from. I love the whole like learning from somebody else. And then even if they do something a certain way, you get to say in your own head, oh, why are they doing it this way? Would I do it this way? What do I like about it? What do I not like about it? Yeah, the whole like philosophy of making beer and I in the email to you, I wrote about like getting like dogma of the brewing process, and that sometimes it seems like there's only one way to do something. And I love questioning, why are we doing this? Is this the best way? Is there a better way? Is this necessary? All that stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
And
it's what it's all about. It's what
it
makes it.
is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a ringing endorsement for, I'm sure you get asked the question a bunch of like, I want to start my own brewery and like, what's
Yeah.
some advice? And it's like,
I got some.
it's always like, it's like go work in a few breweries, not just one, especially on the brewing side of things. It's like,
Yeah, that
I
would.
wouldn't change that part of my past, at all,
Yeah.
like because of just how much more you learn to do things and not to do things from different people that have all so much more
Mm.
experience than you, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. I know it's not always like the most popular opinion, like, but I want to start it now.
Yeah. And there is this part of American or modern culture that a lot of people just want to fast forward through everything through, like, and I feel like some things just take time. Um you have to put the time in and the effort, I guess. And there's a decent amount of like luck and privilege associated with some of these jobs and opportunities too. But yeah, I don't know. My a couple of pieces of for people who want to start a brewery. I don't know. I go back and forth about brewery ownership. Personally, even now, even like on a daily basis, it's like I started the brewery to be able to make beer, and I love working on my feet, love working with my hands. So like doing, like just like doing stuff, like yeah, brewing beer, working in the tap, whatever. And I feel like owning a brewery kind of forces you to do many things that you might not be good at and many things that you might not like to do. And so like I feel like before you start I guess a business of any kind, but especially a brewery or something that, like a food business, it's like do I want to own a business? Is the that's I mean, I think about it like daily.
Yeah.
Because I'm not good at it, and it's also not what I like. The days when I'm sitting at a desk the whole day, by the end of the day I'm like mush.
Yeah.
I'm spent. Whereas like the days that I brew a beer or a long canning day or whatever, it's like maybe my body might be a little tired, but I'm still like sharp in my mind, and I don't know. I'm just more geared towards it.
Yes, yeah. I've always treated that as kind of like that's just, it's the medicine you have to take to keep doing the fun parts.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Because like really the only way I also like it's like, do I like sitting at a desk and like, or do I like when like five different things in the brewery break at the same time and I just have to like spend a half a week like putting the fires out? No, I hate that. But like I get to make whatever I want to make, really. And that's like worth it, I guess. I don't know, depending on which day you catch me on.
Totally.
It's the great part about it. I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah. And then my other big one, I might just have to throw this in there, is that we had like our first kid basically at the same time as opening the brewery. And it's just not ideal. It's just not. I
Yeah.
feel like just like the modern capitalist society and just like working, like difficult childcare, all that. I would, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I would do it differently, but I will say it's lunacy what we did. And it actually like it's still hard because like our kids, we have a 3.5-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's like maybe we're starting to see the end of the tunnel, but like, yeah, like really, like having two babies because as you know, the business is the baby.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know that I probably like, I most definitely like couldn't have done them at the same time. I don't have kids, but it's like, even like at the thought of having a child, it was like, we would have to just dramatically change our lifestyle so much so that you have to, I mean, it's really a priority shuffle, and it's like this thing that there's compromises to be made, I suppose.
yeah,
um and at least 7, 8, 9 years ago, when this was in the works, it was like, I can't compromise. I still, am stubborn and don't like to compromise on many things, but it's
yeah,
like this, like something taking away like that much like energy, like, and that just another unknown variable like being added to, all the other moving parts. Like that was something that I was just like, I
yeah,
can't, I couldn't,
yeah.
there's no way I could have done what you've done.
Yeah. And also just even the lack of sleep, like anybody who has kids will know like that the lack of sleep, like I remember like we used to live above the brewery up until 2019, which was also it was kind of necessary in the beginning because in the beginning I worked every day. Like it was just like my life. It's like the baby was upstairs, I worked every day. But like I remember I have memories of like having like sleepless night, classic like young baby stuff, and then like coming in the next day for like a brew day and just being like empty. And everybody who has kids has to do it, I guess. But yeah, entrepreneurship. I don't know. Am I no business ownership? I guess I don't proprietorship. It's it's crazy. And when you're like, even if you took the baby out of it and then just like added the lack of sleep of the baby to it, it's like you're not yourself. You're not. It's crazy. I don't know. I will say to anybody out there thinking about doing it to think long and hard about it.
Yeah. Well, that's not a bad ending note, John. Think long and hard about your fate.
Think long and hard, everybody. It's hard out there.
All right. Well, thanks, Dan. Dan will be back on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks, so make sure you tune in for that. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Steve Luke of Cloudburst Brewing. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Falling temps and festive seasons are fast approaching, which means now is a good time to develop holiday stouts and brown ales using hibiscus and cinnamon from First Tea. Looking for other new ideas? You can find out more about First Tea's collaborations with brewers and tea ingredients by visiting firsttea.com/blog. That's FIRSDTEA.com/blog. Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, Malteurop Malting Company's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe Malting Company can support your malting needs. Contact Malt Europe Malting Company at customersuccess@malteurope.com or dial 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order.